And hello, welcome everybody to episode 6 of the Ham Radio Concepts podcast. I am Eric, KM4CYG, and this is coming along quite nicely on the podcast. Today is Sunday morning. I'm recording this, so I've had a long weekend, and I dragged a friend along with me to do the podcast because, if you have something you want to talk about or an idea, get on the podcast. Let's talk about it. And I'm using today, you guys have asked, and I delivered, a brand new microphone. I'm using the Blue Yeti microphone, and it sounds really good in my headphones. And yes, I did get headphones now because no more echoes, as you heard on the other episodes where we had some problems with audio. But you got to start somewhere, and then it comes down the road a lot better than it was when it started, hopefully. So, I have a friend with me. I'll let you introduce yourself, Scott. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Scott Taylor, and my call sign is KM4CYG. I've been a ham since 2017, and been primarily just coasting along with my technician license. I haven't really gotten into HF. I'd love to. But I unfortunately live in an HOA neighborhood, so antennas are frowned upon. So I've been sticking to basically 2 meter and 70 centimeter and doing a lot of digital stuff too. But I know that we're going to be talking about CBs. I'm pretty excited about that. I've got a CB in my old car. I've got a 1980 Trans Am that I've restored myself, and I've got my CB in that. I've got a Cobra. Oh gosh, I can't remember the model number, but it has sideband on it. So I prefer the radios with sideband for some reason. I guess I like to spend a lot of money on something that I hardly ever use.
Yeah, this conversation is going to go everywhere with CB. I can tell you that.
Yeah,
and if you're new to the podcast, we are now on all major platforms. Apple on your phone or your iPad, Apple Podcasts. We're on Spotify. We're on iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, Dstar, Podchaser, Audible, Amazon, and also listening shortwave on AM WRMI from Okeechobee, Florida on 9.395 megahertz and 5.950 megahertz, facing North America and Europe, or a little bit of North Africa and some other places. Send your signal reports to WRMI.net and to HamRadioConcepts@gmail.com. I love to see where you're listening and what you're listening on, and I'm going to put your pin on the map when I get that all straightened out. And Scott, your voice is going to be heard on shortwave tonight, my friend.
Oh, that's cool. So, I guess I am getting into HF after all. Huh?
Yeah. Well, shortwave is not a dying. Well, it's not as popular as it used to be, but it still is. I mean, I guess back in the day when you had to listen to stuff and get your material in countries where they didn't have internet and stuff like that, you use shortwave. But I just wanted to be on shortwave because it's different. Give somebody else a medium of listening and bringing back the old AM shortwave feeling. Turn the TV off, get rid of the Facebook for an hour, listen on practically any radio nowadays that'll tune in those bands. A lot of HF radios will, and you can buy shortwave radios rather cheaply. But so Scott, we'll just, and again, this just goes anywhere it does. There's nothing scripted or talked about. In fact, I talked to Scott last week, and I said let's just come up with some topics. And me and him both enjoy CB radio, and we always have. And we were at HamFest, and we were looking at some of the stuff. We always get in these conversations, and it should be fun because Scott, you can fill in on this segment too, or my theory here. CB radio, I called it, is like the gateway drug. A lot of people got into CB and then they progressed to ham radio, and some people like us continue to use CB because I think there's a lot of activity and a whole different part of the hobby. It is radio. A lot of people use it just for Channel 19 if they're driving down the road, which still does provide a very fruitful experience if you're traveling. There are people that are listening on Channel 19. But then you got sideband, and I'm on sideband a lot. And then they push to make FM legal, which a lot of people have used FM on CB anyways, but now the market's there. Would you agree? I mean, people are still using this every day.
Oh, yeah. Well, I don't know if I'm getting out of order here, but my first My first CB radio a long time ago, it had nothing to do at all with one that I had later. And it sounds kind of weird what I'm saying, but my first CB radio was strictly a regular CB. My radio that I had later on was a Ranger 2950, and
Oh, I
that
like
was
those. I like those.
it was the most amazing radio I've ever had. But to be fair, this was before I had my ham license, and technically it is a 10-meter ham radio. It was modified very easily. You just move a jumper over, reset the radio, and boom, now it's a CB. And I did use that, but the cool thing was one of the modes that it does is FM. So I had another friend of mine who also had the same radio, and we would be running around with our friends talking, stirring up trouble as everybody does on CB, or not everybody, but we did sometimes. Anyway, what we could do is we could be in a conversation, and if we needed to say anything to each other, kind of privately, we would switch over to FM. And everybody else who was on AM would hear, whenever we would talk. But he and I, we could understand each other clearly. And it was basically like a taste of what a ham license would sound like. If we were getting into the ham bands, you're talking on FM, on 2 meter and 70 centimeter. That's what it sounded like. It was just so much clearer and was just better to us. So I would love to see FM come to CB radio. Definitely. I mean, it would be amazing.
Yeah.
A lot of people that have never heard it would be able to hear it and go, wow, okay, so this is kind of like a hint of what having a ham license and talking on the ham bands and ham equipment would sound like. Most definitely. I mean, it's amazing. It really is.
Well, there's other countries too that have already been using FM, so I think this is a newer thing for the United States. And different countries do their, the UK has their own. I've actually, believe it or not, we'll get to this, I'm sure. I've actually talked to people in the UK and Scotland and Greenland and stuff on CB, and they have radios with VFOs that you can tune anywhere, and their channel segments in their countries are different, and some allow FM in European or other markets, and then you got like Australia, which they call CB, is on UHF, but it's FM. So my theory is FM has been available in a lot of radios, and I have used FM, like you said. Now, was it legal? No, but neither is, technically, no, but neither is every one of the persons that are running an amplifier, including me. I mean, I'm not hurting nobody, but, FM now will be, I guess, manufactured in more of the radios. In fact, President CBs just announced they have the first released AM and FM FCC approved CB in the United States. The President Rand? No, that's the handheld. It's the President Jackson or something. I can't remember, but it's they're pushing for having FM. But then we talked about this on the video I made. If people are still using AM and you get someone at FM on channel 19, it's going to wipe the whole channel out. I mean, it's going to be full carrier. It's going to be just blanking that out. So I thought, I know they did. They portion the channels on that and say, well, FM should be like 25 through 30 or something. I can't remember now, but I think there should be designated channels, or how about they should have opened the channels and said, okay, 27405 is channel 40. How about 415 to 435 or something would be 5 additional channels for FM, but I think they just got happy on throwing the FM in there, but I think there's some problems that could be with that. What do you think?
Well, especially with anybody with a linear amplifier, anybody with a linear amplifier on the AM side, anybody trying to use FM, I'm sure it would disrupt their conversation. And at the same time, anybody who had a linear in the FM mode would wipe out anybody trying to speak on the AM side in the area that they're trying to. So I could see it could be a problem both ways.
Yeah.
But at the same time, anybody who does not have a linear, who's talking local in AM or FM, they could totally disrupt each other. So it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Well, you know, one thing when I looked up and researched that video, one thing that I learned is that why aircraft has remained on AM. Because when you're on AM, you could actually have 2 or 3 conversations heard on the same frequency. And let's say aircraft switched to FM, right? And then someone was calling Mayday, but someone was already calling tower, you know, from ground to air or whatever, or air to ground or tower control or whatever on FM. You wouldn't have that opportunity of another plane who may be in distress to break in a conversation. Whereas AM, you know, you can get that heterodyne or whatever, and you can have 2 or 3 people, you can hear them in there. And so that's one thing why aircraft has remained on AM. I didn't think about that until I researched.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah. And, you know, so some of the stories, I know you got stories on CB and I got stories on CB. And, you know, I know people that have met their wife or husband, you know, or whoever, they've told me stories how they met each other on the CB back in the day. That was the social media before Facebook and all this stuff came out, you know. That was the original social media. And how many? I mean, did you meet a lot of friends on CB? Did you? What was the most benefit of you having that back in the day? Because I remember, I mean, I met one friend who got me. Listen to this: the friend that got me into ham radio, Patrick KM4CYG, and he lives locally. And I met him. I was 18, and he's older. He was probably in his 30s then, and he's a cool dude. And I talked to him on the CB, and I remember saying, "Hey, man, you got an extra PL259 for my antenna? Mine's kind of flaky." He said, "Yeah, stop by. You're not too far. I'll give you one." So when I stopped by, this is how I got into ham radio. So he was showing me his radios, his CB, his antenna outside. And he says, "Hey, come here, check this out for a second." So I went inside, and he had an ICOM V8000 2-meter transceiver. And it was programmed right up to the local 146640 repeater. And he said, "Watch this." And he pushed a button. And remember, the older repeaters, it would identify W4PHJ repeater. And I said, "Oh my gosh, it talks." And then and on the top of the hour, it would say, "It is 5 p.m. Good evening." And I was like, that was it. I was hooked. And
Right.
From then, I started getting right into headfirst on, I got to get a ham license. But I never forgot about CB. But CB... that made one friend there, for an example, and that was my first taste of ham radio.
That's cool. Yeah, I had been on CB. Gosh, well, okay. So first, my first radio was a Johnson White Front. Do you remember those?
I think I remember Johnson Messenger, right?
Yeah. Well, it was an old tube radio, and it used the huge crystals. So I would ride my bicycle. I mean, this was a long time ago. I'd ride my bicycle over to Radio Shack, and I'd buy crystals. You know, I'd cut grass, shovel snow, whatever I needed to do, and save up my money. Go there, buy crystals, my antenna, and I'm talking about being, 13, 14 years old. My antenna was a trucker style window clamp mount rubber duck antenna. Okay. And they told me what I needed to do was I needed to wrap a bunch of copper wire around a tree limb, clamp this to the tree limb because that's all I had, and then run it down to the ground. Well, I had no idea that what I was doing was creating a dipole basically. And it worked great. So here I am running this tube radio, and what was really cool about the tube radio, and if you have to get a hold of one, you really do, because whenever you would key up the mic as you're speaking, the tubes are flickering and doing all kinds of really cool stuff. Kind of like those plasma balls that. So
you touch it, your hair stands up. And they go,
right.
Yeah, right.
So imagine one of those kind of pulsating with your voice. Then that's what the tubes were doing. and it was just the coolest thing I had ever seen. So from there, I progressed on to just a really small Cobra radio. And that's where I started meeting people outside of my neighborhood, other CBers. You know, CB radio had been around since like I think it was like the 40s or 50s. It had been around a long time, but back then you had to have a license.
Right.
I think it was declassified or whatever it's called. Whenever they you no longer have to. Yeah, thank you. That's I've lost my words. I'm old. I think it was like 1975-ish when you didn't have to have a license anymore. I think it was about then.
See, I missed those days because I didn't. I mean, my first CB experience was at 9 years old, and I used to run outside when my dad got home. I lived in Fort Lauderdale. He had a little Ford Escort, little hatchback thing, and he had a CB antenna on there and a little radio inside. And I used to run in and jump down on the floor so he couldn't see me. And oh, that's right. No, it was a Datsun. He had an old Datsun. Black old Datsun stick shift. I'll tell you why I remember that, because I used to go in the footwell, you know, passenger seat in the floor and talk to the truckers because we lived right by the turnpike. And my dad always told me, don't go in there and touch my radio. Don't touch this. And then one day he came out and he saw me, and he saw I was talking to somebody. And I remember that at 9 years old, I remember one of the truck drivers or somebody said, what's your handle? I had no idea what that was. I don't have a handle on here. It's a microphone, you know? And he's like, no, handle means, you know, your name. What do you call them? And I didn't know what to think of. He's like, what do you like? You know, what's your favorite, this, that. And we came up with Snake Eyes at 9 years old. That was my original.
Oh, that's cool.
That was my original, I don't know who gave it to me, but my handle. So then my 10th birthday, I asked him, I wanted a CB. And he's like, you what? I was like, yeah. So that was my 10th birthday present. I think it was a Cobra 29 LTD, the chrome face. It might, I'm pretty sure that's, or maybe not a 29 or whatever, but it was an older Cobra. And I sat that in my room on a milk crate with two 6-volt gel cell batteries in series with telephone wire. In series, making 12 volt. Then I put the battery charger on there. And I didn't realize that that's where my hum was coming from, it would make it hum. But I mean, that's where I first started learning about stuff like, you know, batteries in series and how to fix the mic. So I had another radio. I remember when I was like 10 something at a pawn shop. I got an Audio Vox. It was an Audio Vox CB, 23 channel, and I remember the mic. There was no audio, and I figured out at 10 or 11 how to take a piece of telephone wire, because this stuff was abundant, and run it outside of the coiled cord because I didn't know how to fix it. So now I have the coiled cord to the mic handle, or the mic, and then I had from the mic to the mic jack a piece of phone cord. Well, I only used 4 feet of that or 2 feet of that, so I couldn't pull the mic out any farther than that piece of phone cord that I ran on there, you know? But that was where I learned some stuff like that. And then fast forward from that, I was like 16, I think, and wasn't in the ham radio yet, but I had a Cobra 90 LTD base station with a Turner Plus 3 microphone. And if you were talking on it and your lip hit the front of the Turner Plus 3 microphone, you'd get zapped. So you had to make sure you weren't kissing the mic like that. But I remember somebody telling me locally, hey, you know, if you I had a 102-inch whip on the roof or outside on the side of a trailer, and he said, you know, if you add 6 more inches, it'll be 108 inches, whatever, and it'll be a full quarter wave. Well, I didn't know what that meant, so I started adding phone cord again to the end of the antenna, and I was just like wrapping it around, and I had no idea what I was doing. But man, it didn't take long to burn those finals out. I mean, they were gone. They were gone. And I keyed up, and I'm like, why does the needle keep going down when I key? That was a 0 output power. I talked on that radio. It was all built and tuned. I mean, this thing was probably putting out 40, 50 watts out of the radio itself, and I burned it up in less than 5 minutes when I had it. Those are the fun things I remember about it.
Yeah. Well, that's the part of learning. I mean, I did the same thing. I started messing around with the antenna. You know, I learned about, okay, so it's right now I've got a vertical dipole basically. So then, well, what if I try a horizontal? How do I get out? Well, that didn't work so well.
It would on sideband, not on AM.
Right. So that's when I start learning about ham radio, because one of the guys that I met uh, on the ham or on the CB that was local, he was a ham, and he was cool because he had a '78 Camaro, and of course I was into Camaros and Trans Ams back then when I was a kid, and so he came by and. He's showing me things about my antenna that I could do better, and he really thought my CB was cool because it was, old from the 50s. And one of the things that he showed me 2 meter, and it sounded so good. And then he said, "Hold on a second, somebody paged me," because he had a pager, and And I was like, "Oh, do you need to use the phone?" He goes, "No, no, no. I can use the auto patch."
Oh
And I
yeah,
was like,
auto pat.
"What?"
Yeah.
So he on the 2 meter radio, he brings up the repeater and types in his code, and all of a sudden the phone starts ringing, and I'm just like, "What?" And so now he's talking on the ham radio over 2 meter on the phone. And I thought, this is it. This is what I got to do. I have to do this. This is amazing. So yeah, I listened to him have a conversation on the phone over the radio.
Yeah, and I remember when I first used it, you had to tell somebody, okay, now I'm talking to you through a radio, so when I'm talking,
Hmm.
I can't hear you, so I let go of the button. And a lot of people wouldn't understand it. How are you talking to me
Right.
through a radio, But
Yep.
that was the coolest thing. And I guess maybe the POTS lines and stuff and the equipment are what made that go away. Because why wouldn't, I guess the newer repeaters don't interface with the older stuff like that. Then you got to have a VoIP and a VoIP this and that interface. I'm sure that's why a lot of it went away. Because I'm sure there's a lot of repeaters out there that still have auto patch on there, though. In fact, I think they're putting the auto patch on our local 6 meter repeater, I think.
No kidding.
David KG40RQ, I think, bought it at Hamfest. Somebody came and dropped it by at our winter field day. They dropped a whole bunch of stuff off and just said, "Here, we have somebody that died. You sell it, keep it, throw it away, whatever you want to do." And there was an auto patch in there. It's a Heathkit auto patch, and he's going to put that, I think, on the 6 meter repeater. So that'll be pretty fun.
That'll be cool.
And we're going to
Yeah, I
talk.
mean, it's so awesome. It's so awesome how all of that technology works. And you think about, well, why, think about how everybody else thinks. They're like, well, why wouldn't you just use a cell phone? Well, this is because if cell phones don't work,
Yep.
we can fall back on this. That's what it all has to do with.
Which could be a situation right now with the current things happening over in Russia and Ukraine and stuff. I mean,
Yeah,
they
yeah.
even said on the TV and whatever they and what I was reading online and everything, they said there could be cyber attacks and take out grids and stuff and whatever. I don't know if they'd go that far or whatever, but think about it. Think about if everything went down or what they're dealing with, those poor people over there, as this country just rolls in there and runs over people. I mean, ham radio would be your only option to make communication or to hear what's going on or to talk amongst yourselves, locally in town or whatever, if everything goes down.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That's a prime example. Not just hurricanes, not just snowstorms, war. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So if you're new to the podcast and listening, you probably already found me on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and you got to type it in. A lot of people said, "I can't find your podcast." It's HamRadioConcepts, all one word, and you will find it. Check this out, Scott. My recent things say I'm number 10 in Finland in the category of technology. I'm number 118 in the category of technology in the United States, and 125 in the category of technology in Canada.
That's cool.
That's a big feat to have something like that. I think the podcast is fun. We're just talking. It's getting back to, like, my wife hit it right on the head. Rag chewing. Said you're mingling. You're talking to rag chewing. It's a little different than me sitting there in front of a radio and having to show it on camera. Even though I like doing that kind of stuff, or a new gadget on YouTube, or a review, or antenna, or how to do this. It's more just a breath of fresh air in between the videos. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And,
oh yeah.
And I mean, the first episode or the second, I can't remember which one it was. I was talking to Matt in Australia, and then to Jeff up in Jersey, and Bob was in Idaho from his K6UDA from his radio channel, and that was fun. So if you're also interested, catch this on from 8 to 9 p.m. every Sunday night, WRMI 9.395 megahertz. And 5.950 megahertz, and thank them. Give them a shout out. Thank them for letting me buy this airtime, and so somebody doesn't come in there and say, I want to buy Eric out. Somebody want that slot more than me. So, but that's pretty cool. So, tell us about your car. Tell us about your car, because I know there's motorheads that listen and they watched Jan's Thunderbird on the video I did, and I've seen pictures of yours, and I can't wait to drive in it.
Well, it's a 1980 Pontiac Trans Am. The car actually started out as a 4.9 liter engine turbo car. I don't know if you remember that. With the whole oil crisis back in the 70s, engines started getting smaller and smaller, and horsepower was getting less and less and less. So the car, basically, my personal opinion, Pontiac came up with, let's put a turbocharger on a V8 just to kind of give it back some of its horsepower. And to be quite honest with you, they engineered a lot of things that barely could get the car out of its own way. So when I got that car, that engine was already gone, and a 1973 Pontiac 455 was put into the car. That is a 7.5 liter engine.
Wow, that thing's bigger than my diesel motor.
It's a monster. It's an absolute monster. So when I got the car, that engine was already in there. It had a 3-speed turbo hydromatic. It was called a Turbo 350 transmission.
Mm-hmm.
That was already in there. I took that out. I put in a 204R automatic transmission. So what that is, boys and girls, that's basically, if you remember the Buick Grand National.
Oh man, I love that car. That's a
transmission.
That's a 3.8, right?
Yeah, it's a 3.8 V6 that
turbo
would beat pretty much any Corvette out there.
Oh yeah, you see some of the videos on YouTube with twin turbos out of the hood. Man, those things are gnarly.
Yeah, they're nasty, and I think that's where GM got the idea for doing the GMC Cyclone and Typhoon from. If you remember that,
never heard of that.
Oh, dude, you have to Google that. It's a pickup truck that had a V6 turbo engine in it, and that also was quicker than most cars. I think there was only one car, I think it might have been a Porsche, if I remember correctly. And this was, 1991, 92, 93, when that was made. It was faster than any car out there except for, I think, one or two cars. You're talking about a car that went 0 to 60 in 4.6 seconds.
Wow.
In that
year, that's quick too.
Oh yeah, so it was an all-wheel drive pickup truck with a V6 turbo engine in it, and I have to be honest with you, I drove one time, and it scared the you-know-what out of me. The first time I put my foot to the floor, I had no idea what turbo lag was. So you put your foot to the floor and you're expecting, okay, how come? Oh my God! It just took right off like an airplane. So, basically, where I'm going with this is the transmission that was in the Buick Grand National is basically what's in the Trans Am right now. So it's a very hardened, made for drag racing. 3-speed automatic, but it has overdrive. So it technically has like a fourth gear, if you want to call it that. So I can drive on the highway and get 25 miles per gallon with this huge engine.
Isn't that big old motor? I was going to ask you, what kind of mileage you get on that monster?
Well, in the city, it's more gallons per mile, because you're not having fun unless you're making noises with the tires. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I think in the city, I'm probably getting like closer to 7 to maybe 13 miles per gallon.
Oh my gosh!
I mean, it's awful, but on the highway,
it's a fun
amazing.
It's a fun 7 miles a gallon.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
And do you have? I guess the question I got to ask now is there a radio, a communication device at all installed in this Trans Am?
Well, I mainly use the CB in it.
You do have a CB in it.
Yeah, I do. So I've got my Cobra. You remember the Cobra model that came out that the entire face lit up and it had weather channels in it?
Yeah, the night watch.
Yes. Thank you. Yep, that's the one that I've got in there. Unfortunately, the lights don't work on it, so I'm going to replace that with LEDs. But
what did you do with the antenna? I'd be afraid to mount anything into something that's that nicely restored.
Well, I'm not afraid to do any buffing and stuff like that. So I basically wipe down a magnet mount antenna, make sure that it's nice and clean, and very gently put it on the trunk. And every time I'm done using it, I very carefully take it off. And there really aren't very many scratches, and I can just buff them right out, and it's not a big deal.
Yeah, you saw what I did to my diesel with my things on the toolbox, because
yes, I did.
my Shark CB HF fiberglass ham sticks, and man, that setup I got there with that, in fact, I got that Uniden 885 hybrid, and a lot of people have asked about it. There's people out there who got bad reviews on it. I've had not one problem with that thing. The scanner, I upgraded the scanner antenna that comes with it. It's just a wire with suction cups, and I actually put a little scanner antenna made by Shark Antennas as well. Man, you should hear some of the stuff that happens in your area when you got a scanner going. And then if you want, then the CB's running in the same radio. And so if there's nobody on the CB, I squelch it up a little bit, and then I'll listen to the scanner. Man, there's quite a bit of violence out there, and a lot of people that fall. I got news for you.
Yeah.
A lot of lift assists, and a lot of people that are overdosing at the bus stop in front of Ruby Tuesdays. I mean, there's just a lot of stuff that goes on. The scanner, I think, is something I had one years ago, and Uniden makes a really good, that True IQ scanner with it's like a $700 scanner, but that thing's amazing. That's the next thing I want to get is a handheld scanner. But this CB has kept me busy in the diesel. I think I might put something else in there, like either a dual band or a GMRS radio or something, to keep myself busy. What do you know about GMRS, Scott? So you're a technician. Let's go back here for a second. Let's back up. As a technician, because I just made this video, and the title was "So You're Just a Technician," meaning a lot of people said, and I talked to them, hey, what's your story? What's your radio stuff? Oh, I'm just a tech. I got to upgrade. No, you don't, because I showed a lot of things you could do, work the satellites and talk all over the world on digital modes and stuff like that. What do you think so far as being a tech in this hobby? Does that are your needs fulfilled? I mean, do you tell me about it?
Well, as far as GMRS goes, I think that's probably like the new CB radio.
Yes.
It's most people seem to be getting their license for GMRS, and a lot of other people seem to be kind of pirating it. I've noticed that there are repeaters going up, personal repeaters going up, and people are pirating on those. So I think GMRS in Orlando, for the most part, seems to be a lot of people pirating.
Really? I haven't noticed that down here. I know that a lot of the GMRS now, they changed some rules or something, and they're linked. Like, you can get on the entire east coast of the United States on GMRS from a repeater here in Fort Pierce. And it's got a lot of activity on it. And they have the southeast net at like 8 on Sundays, and the United States net at 9. They have a lot of activity on GMRS, but you haven't checked into it yet, huh?
Well, I did. I mean, I've got the frequencies programmed into my radios, so I've been able to listen. I don't transmit on it because I don't have my license for it. So I tend to. I've grown up a little bit since my younger years, so I don't transmit on GMRS. But the little bit that I've listened, you can tell people are they're just buying radios or getting radios off of eBay and Facebook Marketplace and stuff like that. They're getting radios off of there. They're not getting their license, and they're just using them.
Yeah, well,
And
that could
and I
happen
can just
anywhere.
tell.
I mean, people could do that on
Yeah,
ham radio
yeah,
too, and I'm sure they have done it.
sure. Hmm.
But so as a technician now, so the question I asked, how do you feel about
Sure.
a tech and what you've been doing lately? What does it feel like to you? Just you're only a tech, you know?
Well, when I say that I'm only a tech, I mean I can basically talk to anybody here locally. I can use my first radio that was really expensive to me was the Kenwood D74. I absolutely love that
Yep.
radio and baby it. Um, I absolutely love Dstar. Now, to be also fair, I have a what was it, an 878
Any
Anytone,
tone that does
and
DMR, right?
and and I love DMR also. I was actually looking into what would it take to put up a DMR repeater here in my house, just to kind of fill in a gap because there really aren't very many DMR repeaters in Orlando. I think there's like three or four,
Well,
and it's amazing how few there are.
I don't think a lot of people are interested in the cost and the tower space or just putting it up at the house because a lot of people are using hotspots now. And you can get on,
Right.
hotspots, and even like the R Finder I had, I can do DMR over IP, which at that point feels like
Hmm.
Zello to me. It's not even radio at that point.
Right.
But I'm glad you brought this up because this episode is going to come out one day, and I'm going to have like three people that are DMR junkies, three people that are fusion junkies, and three people that are D-stars, and then I'll sprinkle a couple guys on P25 and XDN. We might have a 10 or 12 person podcast, and I would love to talk to all these people because everybody has their own favorite. My favorite is D-Star as well. I hate
Hmm.
DMR.
Hmm.
Now, you are on DMR a lot. I am not, but I don't think either one of us have anything for C4 FM. Do you?
No, not at all.
I sold mine. I had a lot. I had the Yaesu FT1D, 2D, and then I played with the 3 and the 5. It's just not my thing. It seems that a lot of Fusion is bridged with DMR, and there's a lot of things missing on Fusion with a hotspot unless you have a local repeater. It's cool.
Hmm.
You can send pictures and do all that stuff. You can do it on D-Star too. And my newest radio is the ID52, which is coming tomorrow. And that's a D-Star handheld. And I sold my Kenwood D74 after only 3 months to fund this. And so what would you like? What do you like more, D-Star or DMR? And why?
Well, Ziz, I'm gonna probably make a lot of people upset.
That's okay.
I I
I
think
do it all
well,
the time. So
well, I think that if you had your show with all of the people with all the different formats, that's going to turn into a my dog's better than your dog kind of thing, and I would be absolutely fascinated to listen to that, just because you're going to hear about all of the well, this compression is it sounds terrible, and this isn't as compressed. Yeah, but it sounds like this because everybody's voice is clipping, and you're gonna hear a lot of people comparing all of the pros and cons right there to those different formats. So that'll be really interesting to listen to. But to get to your question, so D-Star for me, it was very easy to set up. This is very easy. DMR was very complicated and still is extremely complicated. Programming that radio is, once you finally understand what DMR is and how it works, then it's not so bad. But to somebody who doesn't know, It's kind of like think of DMR as Windows, and Dstar is like a Mac. Dstar is just a lot easier to use to me. It sounds better to me. It doesn't sound like a police radio, because DMR sounds. If you listen to a scanner and you listen to it, it's very, very compressed and very robotic sounding.
Yes.
Dstar, not so much. It sounds a lot better. I mean, you can hear people, the tone in their voice, you can hear it a lot better on Dstar, just in my opinion. I like using my hotspot. I've got two Zum spots. One of them is my Dstar Zum spot. The other one is my DMR Zum spot, and I like them both, but I prefer Dstar. I like my Kenwood radio the best. I also have a 5100 by ICOM. Love that radio. That one is out in the Jeep, but I will also carry my Kenwood D74 in the Jeep also. Why? Because I can only listen to one Dstar. I guess what I want to say. Usually, I'm listening to 30 Charlie.
Right.
One of my major complaints here is you can't listen to two different Dstar reflectors at the same time. So I have to basically carry two radios.
Well, on the new 52, you can. On the
I didn't know that.
Yes, I mean, I'm pretty. Yes, I will know tomorrow. I know. I think it's dual independent receivers, and you could do analog, digital on both of them. I think the 51, yeah, when you had two D-Star repeaters, one on the left, one on the right, only one would work at a time. It would mute the other one.
Mm.
And I'm pretty sure that unless I'm wrong, I'm pretty sure that the 52 will do that. And you know, here's another thing. A good to follow you up on that. Dstar was developed by the Japanese Amateur Radio Association, whereas DMR was just an open platform. Anybody can build on it. Like, I mean, it came from, I guess, the commercial world at some point.
Yeah, I think it came from Motorola's Moto Turbo technology.
But I mean, everybody is making their own DMR radio, and that is the biggest problem for me. Is now look, I can grab any ICOM radio in this era that has Dstar and know how to get on it within seconds. The ICOM keeps all their menus the same. They keep all their design ideas the same with Dstar functionality, and everybody. So at most, you're only talking to someone that's got a ID51, a 5100, a 7100, a 31, a 4100, a 52, or a 705, or a 9700. That's 8 radios, if I'm not forgetting any. And then you got DMR. There's 10,000 different radios made by China and Bridgecom and Anytone and R-Finder. A lot of the Chinese are making the DMR, but I can't imagine that. My biggest thing is also I can't ever finish a conversation. It just never ends up. Some guy will come on and yell at me that I interrupted his conversation. I've been talking on this talk group for 15 minutes. And evidently something wasn't jiving there. And then this guy comes in and says, well, we've been talking on here, and where did you come from? It's almost like maybe you can't get all those things connected on the same exact, somewhere one person's radio is better than the other when it comes to DMR, I think. And then you got someone that's using a $30 Baofeng that does DMR. Is that working good with the Anytone 878? That's $300. Or, Anytone really does sound good. I love that radio. It sounds great. And it's bulletproof. But that's, I think, my biggest thing is if you want to go from one DMR radio to another, you better know how to read the manual and start learning how to program it, because they got their own menu structure, whereas the Dstar stuff stays the same every time.
Yeah, I agree. Now, I know that a lot of people complain about the Kenwood D74, that it's really complicated. That was, I think, Kenwood's first or second toe in the pool for Dstar. And I have to say that everything that the D74 does is absolutely amazing. It does way more than my ICOM 5100 does. Way more.
That does. That thing, you can listen to CW and lower sideband. and Bluetooth to the TNC and send an email over radio from your tablet. That thing's amazing.
Yep. Yeah, it's an absolutely amazing radio, and I'm so sad that they stopped making it because it was a hot seller the entire time, and I think it was COVID that killed it.
Or
The
chip
factories
short,
just couldn't.
the chip
Yeah,
shortage.
I'm sorry. Yeah, you're right. You're right. It's the chip shortage. It's a shame that they stopped making it. There were actually rumors, and no hate mail, no hate mail. There were rumors that Kenwood was going to make a mobile version of it, and I was saving my shekels for that. Man, I really wanted that, but no, I don't think it was ever going to come out. So
And when you said that, see, so from my understanding, somebody taught me that the reason Kenwood had Dstar, because Dstar is not ICOM. It's just ICOM uses Dstar. It's not.
no, it's licensed. It's completely licensed. Anybody can do it.
Right, but what they told me was that in Japan they don't like what is it, like a monopoly thing, that not only one manufacturer could use it. So Kenwood was a second, if that makes sense. Instead of only Dstar works with only ICOM radios, I guess that's how they work over there. Is they make two options instead of having one as got the entire market. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And they had to get another manufacturer like Kenwood in there or something to just offer Dstar. I mean, everybody keeps asking me, when are we going to have a radio that does everything? It's not. It's never going to happen. You're never going to have one radio that does C4FM, Dstar, DMR, P25, NXDN. Everybody says that it's coming. It's never going to. Yaesu doesn't want the C4FM. They want you to go to C4FM, buy their gear, and ICOM wants you to buy Dstar gear, and then DMR, anybody can whatever. But
I think the closest thing was Kenwood's, and I can't remember the model numbers, but Kenwood has some more business type radios that you can actually buy the license for DMR. You can buy the license for P25, but the radio comes with analog and NXDN in the radio, ready to go.
I never messed with NXDN. I don't even know anybody that talks on NXDN.
Yeah, I think NXDN is Kenwood's version of kind of like Dstar for business.
Right, land mobile market.
Yeah. So it's basically it's like their version of digital. It's different than DMR, and it's different than P25. I really don't understand why they can't just come up with a universal format. Why can't they all just work together and come up with a good sounding digital format?
Well, yeah, but then it's the best radio that wins if that's the case. Like I said, they want you to buy ICOM wants you to buy their Dstar radio, their 52, and but there's other reflectors out there and talk groups and bridges and even hotspots like the Open Spot 3. I used to be able to go in on DMR and talk on Dstar through DMR.
Yeah.
That's not fun for me though. I like the authenticity of having a Dstar radio in my hand. Because some people say, well, I'll just use this app here and I'll get on and I can talk on any digital format in this app. Well, that's not fun for me, No. And that app's not going to work good if you don't have any Wi-Fi or whatever.
Right.
Now, I'll tell you this. Do you remember about 5-6 years ago that company, I think it was a German company, we call it Vaporware now, they had a prototype of this DMR mobile that had 4G LTE built into it that would update itself from the cloud anywhere you are based on GPS. It would update kind of like the RFinder, and it had DMR and I think P25 in it. And this thing was at shows and they were taking pre-sales, and I mean these companies that did pre-sales like Gigaparts had $35 hold until it came out. I mean they racked up tens of thousands of dollars, people wanting it, and the company just never made it. Like, so long, thanks for the money. Like, they just totally took off. And then they, to drive their sales, they showed a handheld that looked like an iPhone that had all the different modes, is what it said. Never came up. But you want Dstar, you push this button, this app. You want DMR, you push this one. And it was supposed to be a handheld, looked like an iPhone that did everything. And it never existed ever. But I'd have to look. I have to find what. I forget the company. I remember there was one in Tampa, and then the other side of it was in Germany. So I can't remember what it was, but I don't think it'll ever happen, and I don't want it to happen. I like their own ways of doing it. Maybe a universal format would be fun, but not a radio that's got all the different modes in it.
Right, right. Yeah, I would love it if somebody would come up with a version of a digital format, whether it be Dstar, DMR, whatever it is that they base it off of. But please give it some more bandwidth so that it sounds better. It doesn't have that robotic digital sound, that VoIP sound to it.
That's one thing about the Fusion that I did like was the voice wide mode. See, it's usually 12.5 kilohertz. So like Dstar will have 6.25 kilohertz of voice, and then the other 6.25 kilohertz is the data, GPS, your call sign, message, whatever. Same thing for Fusion if you went on the digital narrow. But then when you hit digital wide or voice wide, it was the full 12.5 kilohertz. You didn't have any of the data stream with it for GPS or call sign, but you did have a wide open 12.5 kilohertz bandwidth, and it sounded great. It's still out there. It sounds great. But I'm picturing when I had my FT1, FT2, the voice wide mode was a full 12 and had twice as wide as DMR and Dstar, and it sounds great when you do that. But I like the bells and whistles. I like the fact that I can take this ID52, Bluetooth it to my phone, take a picture of my phone, send it over Dstar while I'm talking at the same time, and it draws on the other person's screen as we're talking. I like stuff like that. And Yaesu had with the camera mic and stuff, and you can take a picture and send it, but that don't work through hotspots, only repeaters. So that was a big downfall for that. Then they had rooms. They had rooms and they had news function and all this stuff, and none of that works unless you have a Fusion repeater. And not a lot of people have Fusion repeaters up, or they they use hotspots. So I like the bells and whistles and stuff that I may never use, but it's there. And kind of like why I liked the D74. I mean, I never listened to sideband receive it in the 3 months I had it. I did use the Bluetooth to the TNC, but all the stuff that it did in there, I didn't use half of it. But I like having it in there.
Right.
That's just that's how I look for radios. How many features kind of fit in a box that I may not use them all?
Right. Well, for the most part, when you have the D74 in your hand, you're using the antenna on it, or if you switch over to the AM modes to the shortwave and HF bands, then it switches over to that little tiny internal antenna, and that just doesn't work. So what you have to do is, if you have an HF antenna at your shack, then you have to disconnect the antenna from the D74 and connect that antenna to the D74 so you can actually listen to some decent HF. Well, why do that? Because you have an HF radio there, so you might as well just use your HF radio,
Yeah, that's true.
So the reception on it wasn't great on the D74 because you need a decent antenna for it. Right. So I can see that it's like, hey, that's a cool feature, but if you're going to listen to HF, you're going to use an HF antenna, which means that you have an HF radio there, so you really wouldn't want to monitor with that.
Right.
D74.
But hey, how many other handhelds have that in it to begin with?
Exactly.
A couple of other
I
ones.
mean, it's cool to have, but when you're living in the city, you're using that little internal antenna, you're not going to hear a whole lot.
Well, with that said, we'll start to wrap it up here before the hour is over. So I'll ask you a question. You got 15 seconds to answer. If you could have one CB radio, what would it be? Go.
One CB radio, what would it be? I would probably go back with a Ranger radio. I would probably do the RCI 2970.
That's the 400 watt model, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a monster. But I want to have I must have AM, FM, upper and lower sideband. I have to have that.
Yep.
I don't know why, but I have to have it.
And if you're gonna get upgraded general, is it sooner or later?
Probably later. I have to get an antenna issue figured out. My attic is full of the foil bubble wrap insulation stuff that's stapled to the ceiling of the attic. So I can't put an antenna in the attic, and I can't put an antenna on the roof.
Right.
So I'm probably going to have to do something stealthy, but I would love to do my general. I really would. CW is going to be something that I'm going to have to really have to buckle down and learn.
That's my next target,
Yeah.
CW. That's the next thing I'm learning.
Yeah.
And one last question. What's the best radio you've ever owned? Ham, CB, whatever. Best radio you've ever owned?
Best radio, I have to say the D7-4.
Yeah?
It's just amazing radio. It really is.
One day I'll have to play with my Siltronics 1011D for CB tube radio. It's actually 10/11. One day we'll do some more playing with tube CV stuff. But
nice.
For those who are listening, to wrap it up, I want to thank a couple people, my sponsors, Ham Radio Prep. Scott, have you been familiar with that? Have you heard me talk about them? My great sponsors.
Yes, I have.
They really a lot of people, man. They really have a great structure. They're announcing something brand new. I won't say here, but it's going to be a whole new thing along with Ham Radio Prep. So you can visit Ham Radio Prep and use the code that they gave me for this podcast, EricPodcast20, and save 20% on any course that you buy to upgrade your license. And it makes it a lot more fun than memorizing answers out of a book, really. You get to see some videos and play some quizzes and get a little more of an understanding on why you're being asked this question. But it's not going to make you a ham radio operator. That's why we like you to come watch our YouTube channels where you can learn and see exactly what you can do in the hobby. And so I thank Ham Radio Prep for sponsoring all my efforts. And I also want to thank all my patrons. You see, guys, you're paying the bill for the WRMI transmitter. You've helped me out buying a new microphone, so I sound just that much better. And the patrons, I'm now putting your money to work. It's been a little while. I haven't thanked you enough, but I thank them now. Thank you to everybody who went to patreon.com/HamRadioConcepts and just threw me a buck, a month here or there. It adds up, and it makes stuff like this happen. And I want to thank WRMI for letting me buy this spot. And please send them a signal report. Tell them what you think about the podcasting. Tell them what you think, that you like it. You want to see more of it so that we can stay on here, because that would be pretty cool. And again, Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, Spotify, Podchaser, Dstar, Viavav. I don't even know what Viavav is, Scott. iHeart.
It sounds exciting.
iHeartRadio, and Google Podcasts, and Amazon, and Audible. Something to listen to that's easier, and I hope everybody enjoys it. Go ahead, Scott. You got about a minute and a half. What did you think of the podcast? Thank you for being on. And what do you want to hear on one episode?
Thank you very much for having me. I really enjoyed the podcast. I was a podcaster way back when the whole thing started. I was even involved with Adam Curry, for a short time. Saw the whole thing grow. All my equipment's basically like sitting in a box in a closet. I have to dig that stuff out sometime. What I would love to, I would love to hear you have a representative from all the different formats, just like you said. So somebody from DMR, somebody from the System Fusion side, somebody from Dstar, somebody from P25, and all do a round table.
Oh, that would be
be amazing.
That would be impossible. I could get them on, and we could have an episode each. In fact, I think I talked to Ray Novak. I think he's going to have time to get on one time from ICOM. So maybe we'll start there. But the vendors don't really like to talk about the other modes. They only talk about theirs. So I'll have to arrange it where I can ask them and use that podcast to get information from them about the mode that they support. But thank you very much, Scott, for being on, buddy. And it was good seeing you at Hamcation. And it was good having you on the Ham Fest and on the podcast. And see, guys, this is what Ham Radio does. It brings you friends like this. I mean, I would have never met someone as cool as Scott. This dude's cool as ever. And we go to dinner every year after Ham Fest, and it's fun. So thank you very much, Scott, for everything. And we will talk again soon, my friend.
Awesome. Sounds good. Thanks for having me.
Go ahead and sign off with your call so they got you.
All right. Well, KM4CYG. Thanks again for listening.
Yeah, man. And this is KJ4YZI with HamRadioConcepts. More podcasts are on the way. Stay tuned.